Welcome to the 13th hour, where the veil grows thin and reality begins to bend.
I used to think I was careful. I checked profiles, I Googled names, I met people in public. But you can do everything right and still end up staring at a door, praying it holds before the police get there. His name was Evan. We met on Tinder. He was handsome and articulate. He asked about the book and my photo instead of my body. And for me, a total bookworm, that somehow felt romantic. It made him seem safe. He was charming, polite, funny, quirky. He remembered every detail I gave him. My favorite coffee, my old dog, the way cilantro tastes like soap to me. It should have been sweet, but sometimes it felt rehearsed. There were tiny red flags. He messaged constantly but never late at night, dodged questions about his job, and always turned conversations back toward me. But he was normal enough, nice enough, and nice can be disarming. We met at a wine bar downtown, one of those cozy places with candles and old bottles and the smell of roasted garlic in the air. He waved when I walked in, smiling like we had already met. He looked exactly like his photos, except for one thing. His face was considerably paler than in his photos. I figured he used his best photos in his profile, probably his best just back from vacation photos, tanned, composed, and confident. He had already ordered a bottle of red wine, pouring both glasses himself. I noticed, but told myself not to read too much into it. Maybe he was just old-fashioned. We talked for hours about books, bad dates, travel, his dog. He was attentive, his gaze steady, maybe too steady. When the night ended, he stood and said, "Next time, I'll cook for you. You pick the wine." I smiled and said, "We'll see." We walked out of the restaurant together. Now that I think back, the weird thing was he never once tried to touch me the whole night, not even a handshake goodbye. But the date was pleasant enough, so I didn't make too much of it. It was late when our date ended, but the city was still alive. Headlights sweeping through puddles, strangers' laughter from a nearby bar. I pulled my coat tighter and started home. 2 blocks, the back of my neck prickled. That feeling, the weight of eyes you can't see. I looked back. A man crossed the street, and a couple passed by. Nothing weird. I kept walking, faster now. But the feeling followed me, a quiet awareness, a pressure between my shoulders. By the time I reached my building, my hands were slick with sweat. I fumbled with my keys and dropped them. I cursed under my breath at my own clumsiness. Inside the lobby, the air was still. The light above me flickered on and off, giving the stairwell an even creepier feeling than it already had it late at night. I climbed the stairs, waiting to hear the steps of someone else echoing behind me. At the 5th floor, my floor, I paused and looked down the stairwell. Empty. I unlocked my apartment, slipped inside, and locked the door behind me. Finally safe. Or so I thought. I set my bag down and went to the balcony window, telling myself to look just once to prove I was being paranoid. The street below glowed gold under the street lamps. People moved here and there, a cyclist, a couple, a man walking a dog. Then I saw him, a shadow, standing at the far end of the block. Clearly male, clearly watching my apartment building. I couldn't make out his face. Could have been anyone, I told myself. City life, people always coming and going. He didn't move for a long moment. My phone dinged. Someone had texted me. I turned my head for a split second, but when I turned back, the man was gone. I looked up and down the street and didn't see him anywhere. I didn't understand how he could have disappeared in such a short period of time. There was nowhere for him to hide. It was like he just disappeared. I exhaled hard and whispered, "You're being ridiculous." But deep down I knew something had already started. A week later, I was standing in Evan's kitchen. It smelled like garlic and orange peel. I didn't see the dog he had bragged about so much at dinner. Soft jazz played on a vintage record player somewhere in the background. The apartment was spotless. Too spotless. A strong smell of bleach lingered in the air. No photos, no mail, no sign anyone really lived there. No evidence of family or friends. He handed me a glass of wine the moment I walked in the door before I even had a chance to take my coat off. "Cabernet," he said, smiling. "Same as last time." The glass was cold. Red wine should not be cold. I took a sip anyway. Bitter, but fine. He watched me drink. We ate dinner. He refilled my glass again, even though I hadn't finished the first glass. When I tried to pour my own, he gently moved the bottle out of reach. "Relax," he said. "You're my guest." I remember he poured himself one glass, but never drank any. Now that I think about it, he didn't eat anything either. Halfway through the meal, the edges of the room began to blur. Sound dulled, the light softened. That creeping, syrupy warmth slid up my spine. My pulse exploded in my chest. Every instinct screamed, something is wrong. "Long day," I said, forcing a yawn. "Mind if I use your bathroom?" He smiled, teeth glinting. "Sure. Second door on the left." I stood. The floor seemed to sway. As I turned down the hallway, I heard it. His footsteps. He was walking behind me. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to feel the air move. The tiny hairs on the back of my neck lifted all at once. I didn't look back, just kept walking. One step, then another, until I reached the door. I stepped inside and locked it. Click. The sound was deafening. I leaned against the sink, trying to breathe. My reflection was pale, pupils huge. Then I saw it. The line of light under the door, and in it, his shadow. 2 shoes, still, right outside. He hadn't gone anywhere. My body froze. Every muscle locked. I could feel the blood rushing in my ears, the tremor in my legs. After a long, impossible minute, the shadow shifted and moved away. That was my chance. I grabbed my phone, fingers slipping on the screen. 911. "I think I've been drugged. I'm locked in the bathroom at my date's house. Please hurry." The dispatcher's voice was calm, steady, an anchor. She asked for my name, the address, symptoms. I answered as quietly as I could. Then, the shadow came back. It slid into the light like it had been waiting. He didn't knock at first, just stood there. Then softly, "Hey, you okay in there?" Every hair on my body lifted. Yeah, I said, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Just a second." He lingered. The silence was alive. Then gently, "You're sure? You look kind of pale." My throat burned. "I'm fine." Finally, the shadow moved away again, slow, reluctant. The dispatcher whispered, "Stay calm. Don't unlock that door. Help is coming." I slid down to the floor, phone pressed to my chest, eyes fixed on that strip of light, praying it stayed empty. Time disintegrated. Seconds stretched like hours. The drug was spreading. My hands numb, my thoughts slurring at the edges. I knew if I passed out, that door wouldn't save me. The dispatcher kept talking. "Stay with me. Keep your eyes open." Her voice was fading, fast. I slapped my face hard. The pain sparked like electricity, pulled me back. "Don't you dare," I whispered, "don't you dare pass out." Then came the sound I feared most, a floorboard creaking outside. He was moving again. The shadow reappeared beneath the door. He was right there, close enough for me to hear him breathing, slow, even, patient. My stomach twisted. I pressed both hands to my mouth, holding in the scream clawing its way up.
The dispatcher's tone sharpened. "They're almost there. Just a few more minutes." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. His voice seeped through the door, low and calm. "Why are you hiding?" It was almost kind. Almost. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying. Then, faint but growing, sirens. He heard them too. The shadow vanished. A door slammed somewhere in the apartment. Then shouting, real voices, "Police!" Outside the bathroom door, I could hear boots on the floorboards and someone shouting, "It's the police! Can you let us in?" I tried to get up, but I was too far gone. I tried to call out, but the words wouldn't form. The thing I saw was the door bursting open and a rush of cold air, and then everything went black. When I woke up, everything was too white. Machines hummed beside me. A nurse said I was safe and that the officers had found me just in time. Then 2 detectives came in, notebooks in hand. They asked me to start from the beginning. I told them everything I could remember. When they finished, they didn't speak. The older one opened a folder and slid a photo toward me. "Is this who you think you were with?" I said quickly, "Yes, that's him. That's Evan." They exchanged a look. The younger detective said, "Ma'am, the man in that picture died a month ago. No one has lived in that house since." I blinked at him. "No, I was just with him. He is the one who drugged me." He didn't answer right away. The older detective flipped his notebook shut. I swallowed hard, trying to fight back my tears. "What did you find in my blood work?" He nodded. "The toxicology report came back positive. You were drugged." I stared at them. My throat felt raw. "You say he's dead, then who did it?" I grabbed my phone and showed them Evan's Tinder profile. The older detective blew it off as someone else could have copied his profile, or his profile was hacked and someone was using his account. I shook my head and scrolled through the Tinder chat, photos, and the timestamp from the night before. "See? He texted me his address and the time he wanted me to come over. He was there." The younger cop leaned in, studying the screen. "Ma'am," he said finally, "that account hasn't been active in 3 weeks. We checked it as part of the investigation. It's been dormant since the night he died." "What investigation?" I asked, trying to hold back my increasing panic. The older detective closed the folder. "He killed himself in that house. When the team went through the property, they found his girlfriend in the basement freezer. On a tip from a neighbor, they also found several women buried in his backyard." The room seemed to tilt. The monitor next to me kept its calm rhythm while the rest of the world stopped. "We're still working on identifications, but they all fit a similar description. Red hair, blue eyes, and petite. They all look like you." I couldn't breathe for a moment, and yet I understood that whatever had been in that house with me, whatever had poured the wine and followed me silently down the hallway, was something evil and no longer living. And I prayed to God it was done with me. When I first moved to New Orleans, everything felt like a movie set. Balconies dripping with flowers, jazz spilling from open doors, the smell of sugar and rain in the air. I didn't know anyone. I was living off savings, half-heartedly job hunting, half-heartedly swiping. That's where I met Lucien. He said he was an artist who worked nights. He only texted after dark. If I wrote him during the day, there'd be nothing until midnight, when he'd send something perfectly phrased like, "The sun gives me hives, drinks at 10 p.m.? He was witty, strange, deliberate, and I was lonely enough to find that intoxicating. I swiped right anyway. I was an artist student once. At least that's what the degree says. Maybe it was the artist in me that made me look past the weird.
And if I'm being honest, someone who saw the world through an artist lens might actually understand the way art can make loneliness feel beautiful. He messaged that night, "You're new here." I told him I was. He said he was an artist, mostly portraits, and that he kept odd hours. When I wrote back the next afternoon, he didn't reply until midnight. That became our pattern, me texting in daylight, him answering only after dark. "Sun gives me hives," he joked once. "So you're a vampire," I wrote. "Only by disposition." His messages were short but intense. He asked where I lived, what I liked to paint or write, what I missed most about home. He didn't flirt so much as study me. Our first meeting was at a bar on Royal Street that smelled like bourbon and weed. It wasn't loud, just the low hum of conversation and the slow swing of a jazz trio in the corner. The kind of place where everyone looked like they were pretending to be someone else for the night. He found me before I found him. I recognized him from his profile picture, the sharp lines of his face, the way he seemed both relaxed and watching everything at once. "Leah," he said, in a voice low enough that I almost missed it over the music. And yes, he was wearing dark-tinted glasses, in a bar, at night. "You really do prefer the dark," I said, half teasing. He smiled and took off his glasses. "It's my eyes. They're sensitive to the light," he said flirtatiously. He was taller than I expected, about 6'4". He was dressed all in black again, dark shirt, dark jeans, even the rings on his fingers were black metal. And fortunately for me, he was extremely handsome. He had thick, curly black hair and a light olive complexion. His eyes were a bright, pure emerald green, and he had deep dimples when he smiled. He was the kind of handsome you can't help but notice. People looked up when he walked in. He didn't belong there, and somehow that was the point. His voice was low and deep. I noticed his hands. There was paint under the nails, like faint bruises. We talked for hours about art, my move, my apartment, whether I liked living alone. He listened the way people do when they genuinely care about what you have to say. When I admitted I had only been there a few weeks and didn't know anyone yet, he smiled wider. "Then I'll have to be your first friend," he said sweetly. He was magnetic. I wasn't expecting to like him as much as I did. When he suggested dinner the next night at his place, a proper meal, not just booze, I said yes. His home was tucked behind an ornate wrought iron gate on St. Anne Street, the bars wrapped in jasmine so thick it almost hid a faint metallic scent underneath, like rain on old pennies. When the gate clicked shut behind me, the sound was final. Inside, the air was cool and still. Candles glowed in wide brass holders. Their flames burned low, wax spilling down like melted bone. Heavy velvet curtains framed the windows, and the old wood floors creaked softly beneath our steps. Crystal chandeliers in every room. "Your place is incredible," I said. He gave a quiet laugh. "It's probably too much. I'm bad at throwing things away that I love." The walls were crowded with paintings, blurred portraits, women's faces caught in mid-movement, streaks of crimson woven through each piece. The color looked alive in the light. I leaned closer and frowned. "Is that hair?" He joined me, hands behind his back. "Yes." "You embed it?" He nodded once. "Hair holds the varnish. It catches light differently, gives the surface a pulse." I hesitated. "And the red, that's just paint, right?" I laughed as I teased him. He looked at me sidelong. "Mostly. That particular color brings the paintings to life. It binds the layers together in a way oil or acrylic never could. Everything that lasts costs something," he said finally. "They're beautiful," I whispered, though the words didn't fit. They were exquisite. The faces of the women had a softness to them. Their eyes were half closed and they had the most ethereal, serene look to them, like they had just taken their last breath. The colors and brushstrokes were deep and precise. It was the kind of technique I tried for years to learn in art class. He poured wine for me, the red liquid catching the candlelight. His own glass was darker. Whatever was in it looked thicker, heavier. To new beginnings, he toasted. We ate slowly. The steak was nearly rare. Warm blood pooled on the bottom of our plates, mixing with the potatoes and fresh vegetables from his garden. He asked why I had come to New Orleans, and I told him a change, a restart, maybe some healing. You came to the right city, he said. It doesn't erase things here. It repurposes them. Like you do with your art? I asked. Something like that. Most women don't notice that about my art. He smiled happily. New Orleans believes in resurrection. Everything that dies just gets reinvented here. I smiled. That sounds like magic. He looked at me for a long moment. Magic. Yes, something like that. The candlelight flickered between us. He studied me for a long time, then said, "You seem like someone who's alone." I didn't plan to be. He nodded. Nobody does. But solitude, it's a kind of raw material. You can use it to your advantage, if you know how. He meant it kindly, I think, but the air in the room seemed to pull tighter around his words. When he reached to refill my glass, his fingers brushed mine. They were cool. "You're cold," I said. "Never," he answered. "You are." Something metallic drifted through the air again, faint and sweet. I told myself it was the pipes, the age of the house. When we finished, he rose and pushed back his chair. "Would you like to see the studio? If you're going to be my muse, you should see where the work begins." He led me down a long, narrow hallway and unlocked a door near the back of the house. The air that came out was cooler, heavy with varnish, and something sharper underneath. The moment he opened it, the smell hit me. It wasn't the faint, pleasant odor of turpentine and oil paint I'd expected. This was stronger, thicker, sharp and metallic. I stopped just short of the threshold. "What is that?" He glanced back at me. "Varnish," he said simply, holding the door wider. But varnish never smelled like that before. "This is where the magic happens, as you put it," he said seductively in my ear as he slowly nudged me into the room. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop, and that smell, it was getting stronger. The studio was dim, lit only by a few low lamps and the weak flicker of candles along a shelf. Canvases leaned everywhere, against walls, over chairs, stacked too deep. The colors were dark, rich, saturated in a way that made them seem to absorb light rather than reflect it. In the center of the room stood an easel holding a half-finished painting. It was a woman, young, graceful, her face turned slightly to one side. Her eyes were closed, lips parted just enough to suggest breath. I moved closer, drawn in by how lifelike she seemed. The brushwork was stunning, layered and delicate, the tones of skin so realistic I could almost imagine her veins pulsing underneath her skin. But as I leaned in, I noticed the surface texture again. Tiny strands, caught and sealed beneath the varnish, glinting in the candlelight. Hair, just like before. And then something else. A scent, subtle at first, beneath the turpentine and wax. Sweet and metallic. Familiar. I frowned, breathing in a little deeper. On the easel, the newest painting glistened under the candlelight. The red tones looked fresh, as if they'd been brushed on minutes ago. I leaned closer and froze. Tiny pale shapes were inching along the lower frame of the easel, curling over one another in slow motion. For a second, I couldn't place what I was seeing. And then the smell hit me. Sweet, metallic, wrong. The maggots movement traced upward towards a streak of dark, sticky color on the canvas itself. Where had I smelled that before? Hospitals, maybe? Oh my God. Blood. No, it couldn't be. I took another small step back. There's a smell, I said quietly. He was standing behind me now. I could feel him watching. You notice more than most. Are you surprised?
I turned to look at him. Surprised? I told you, he said, voice calm and low. My paintings are alive. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The faint metallic scent seemed to thicken in the air. And then, somewhere behind the velvet curtain at the back of the room, I heard it. A slow, steady drip. Drip. I turned toward the sound. What is that? Lucien's voice came smooth and amused. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. I stepped closer. The curtain's edge was cool and damp. When I pulled it aside, the air behind it hit me like iron. The woman in the painting was there, what was left of her. She hung inverted, motionless, skin white as porcelain. A thin red line traced from her cut throat down to a wide gold basin on the floor, where each quiet drop landed with a hollow tap. The last of her measured out one drip at a time. Lucien watched me. It's only the last few drops of her, he said gently. The rest is already in the work. She'll live forever. Like you will. Something inside me cracked. I stumbled backward, knocking over an easel. He lunged at me. He was smiling, happy. My terror was another brushstroke in his composition. She wanted to be remembered forever, he said sarcastically. Now she'll never fade. Stop fighting me. My breath hitched. You killed her. He smiled, slow, deliberate. No, my dear, I preserved her. And I plan on doing the same for you. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket, calm and certain. You said you wanted to be seen. Immortality requires participation. That broke the spell. I kicked him between his legs and ran. The front door latch stuck. I threw my shoulder into it until the old wood screamed and gave way. The courtyard air hit like a wave of flowers and rain. I slammed through the jasmine gate, skinning my arm on the iron, and tore into the street. I called 911 with shaking fingers. The words poured out between gasps. Address, name, he's going to kill me. By the time police arrived, he was gone. The police searched the house. In the basement, one woman's body. In the courtyard vegetable garden, several more. Jars of blood were found in his refrigerator. Analysis of the thick, viscous liquid. Drank at dinner. Human blood, too. Lucien wasn't Lucien's real name. He'd been wanted for multiple murders across Louisiana. When the story hit the news, collectors called his work the Blood Series. Prices soared. Critics called it a meditation on mortality and vampirism in modern-day America. The detective who took my statement told me they'd found a notebook in the studio. Each entry listed a name, a date, and a phrase. The last page held mine. Beneath it, written in blood, immortality pending. Lucien, or whatever his name was never found despite a massive search. It was like he disappeared into thin air. I still walk past that block sometimes. Tourists stop to photograph the Iron Gate, the Jasmine, the house where the vampire artist lived. They call it haunted. Maybe it is. I know better than to look too long. New Orleans is full of ghosts that never learn the difference between life and death. And when I pour myself a glass of red wine now, I hold it up to the light. I make sure it's only wine.